How's it going, everyone? Well, I'd made a video a little bit ago talking about my Bible study tips and what I do. Well, a couple of videos about that, actually. And I believe in both those videos I made comments about how I really don't recommend that you do word studies. And the context that I'm talking about is doing Bible studies as far as, you go and you look up a word in the original language, whether Greek or Hebrew, and then you go and look up in a lexicon. A lexicon is basically an old word dictionary. But anyway, you look up what the original word was in that passage, and then you go and look at a lexicon and see what the definitions were. And I had said that I really recommend that you do not do that. And somebody had questioned me on that and said, well, why shouldn't we? And I laid out my reasons. And they thought, and they said something which I actually thought was pretty insightful. And they said, wouldn't it be better to simply teach people how to do word studies than simply telling them not to? Because the reality is that they're going to do it anyway. And I actually think there's some logic to that, and that's a very insightful comment. So what I did is I actually I reached out to a friend of mine. His name is Daryl Burling, and he runs what's called the Biblical Mastery Academy, and at or BMA. And at BMA, he teaches runs courses on both Hebrew and Greek. Anyway, I reached out to Daryl and I asked him if he would make a short video explaining some of the pitfalls of doing word studies, especially if someone doesn't know any of the original languages. Now, Daryl's context is going to be that of the Greek New Testament because that's mainly his focus. But really, these rules could apply to both Hebrew and Greek. But anyway, go ahead and check out this video that Daryl made for me.
So why should we be careful about word studies, and how do you go about doing them well? Well, word studies are one of those areas that, particularly for people who don't understand Greek and don't know Greek, they are very prone to make errors. The reason for this is quite straightforward, really. If you think about it, when you look at a lexicon or a dictionary, for any given word, there's normally a range of meanings. We call this the lexical range of a word, and if you think about it, we have the same thing in English. One word can mean slightly different things in different nuances with different contexts. So the same thing is true of Greek, and the problem is, of course, that when you go from one language to another, one word in one language actually might map to several words in another language. A great word, for example, here is logos. So the word logos could mean word, as we often will take it, but it's not the only word in Greek that means word. Rhema also will mean word in a lot of contexts, but also logos can have the idea of reason. And so you end up getting these words built off that same root that end up meaning reason or an account or something like that. And even nouns, the logos noun itself can actually mean an account. There are passages in the New Testament that use it in that exact way. And so when you look at a dictionary, then you'll see these different meanings, these English glosses, if you like, that you can use to apply to this particular word. They will then also say, in this context, it should be understood as this, and in this context, it will be understood as that. But of course, in many cases, the one you're looking at actually isn't listed. And so you end up left with these glosses, and you don't know which one it is, so you end up having to pick which one of these is best. And so one of the challenges is actually to be able to understand the context of the verse and how the word is actually working in its context, because the meaning of a word depends on its context. And so if we take a word out of its context, namely by looking at the dictionary, we run the risk of actually divorcing the meaning of the word from the context and then reading that meaning from outside back into the text itself. We've got to be really careful with this, and there's a number of different ways that we can do this. So word studies is something to be really careful of. And I think if you don't understand Greek, you want to be aware. And it's not to say you can't do a good word study well if you don't know Greek, but you have to be more careful. If you know Greek and you look at a word in Greek and you're reading it in Greek, it's much easier to sort of see the nuance on the word. But if you don't know Greek, then it's much harder to see that. So it's just one of those things that if you don't know Greek, you just need to spend more time thinking about it. And you probably want to be less creative rather than more creative. You don't want to look at a word and then go look at where the word came from, and from that make this argument that because it came from this root and that root means XYZ 3,000 years prior to the New Testament, that the word now means this in the New Testament. That's what's called the etymological fallacy, and that's just reading an ancient meaning of the word into the meaning of the word at that particular time. Now, we could do the same thing in English with the word nice. In fact, D.A. Carson does this in his book Exegetical Fallacies, where he says that if you were to use the word nice based on what it originally meant in French, it actually meant ignorant. So if you were to use that to say, well, when people call each other nice in the 21st century, they're really just calling each other ignorant. Well, of course, that's not what we're doing, and that's not what the word means. And so to make that same kind of mistake in Greek, particularly where you've got a lot longer history of the language, then you want to be really, really careful with that, because what the word meant in Homer could be quite different to what it meant in the New Testament, or it could be exactly the same. So you need to look into that to understand, well, just because it meant this here doesn't mean it's going to mean that somewhere else. So we just want to be really careful when it comes to word studies, that we do them wisely, that we don't try to be inventive and creative. The most creative you can get really is to look at different translations, to see how different translations translate the word, and often that will give you different views or interpretations of how the word is working in any given context. So that will be about as inventive as you want to get. And you will find times where translations will come up with quite significant differences. And this particularly happens with things like prepositions as well, and that's another whole kettle of fish. So anyway, just be aware of that and take your time working through word studies.
Well, thanks, Daryl, for making that video. You know, Daryl's a really cool guy, and like I said, he runs, it's called Biblical Mastery Academy, and if you're somebody that wants to learn the original languages, I highly recommend you check out his channel. There'll be a link in the description below to go check them out. They do fantastic stuff, really, and his YouTube channel, I think, is the best as far as New Testament Greek content, at least that I'm aware of. So, but anyway, Daryl's a great guy. Now, what's interesting, and I like what Daryl brought up, which is he brought up something which is that, and which is the main reason why I discourage people from doing word studies, is that a lot of times you can look up a word in the original language and see a list of possible definitions or translations, right? And many times, particularly if you're not familiar with Greek or Hebrew, most people will look at that list and go, oh, it could be any one of these, and they'll just choose the one that they think works the best, or the one that they would fit their theology the best. And that's why I said a lot of bad theology can come from word studies, because a lot of times people will go and look at that list of possible definitions and choose whichever one they think fits their argument the best. So that is the reason why I discourage word studies. If you want more videos on this in the future, I'd be happy to make them. Thanks again to Daryl for making that video for me. There's actually a part 2 to this video, which I asked Daryl another question, and so stay tuned for that one. If you want to check out more about Daryl's channel, please look below. They'll put a link down below to check it out, and it's highly worth your time. He's a very, very godly Christian man who has a fantastic ministry, and we really want to support him over there. Support them over at Biblical Mastery Academy. So at any rate, I hope this helped you guys out. So God bless you guys. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.